Right, good morning, everybody, and you are very welcome to this Governors for Schools conference. We're at the midpoint of the National Conference for Governors for Schools, which is running right across the UK, and we're very pleased that as the midpoint, it has come to be hosted here in Wales, which is important for us, given that Governors for Schools came to Wales just about a year ago. And Lauren Nadine is leading that on behalf of Governors for Schools. My name is Paul Slevin. I'm President and Chair of the Chamber of Commerce down here in my voluntary role, but I also have a full-time role as a corporate advisor on behalf of Quantum Advisory. And I'm joined this morning by a panel of experts, which I'll come to very, very shortly. What I'd like to do first is just go through some housekeeping rules, if I may, please. You're all incredibly used to this after probably nigh on 2 years of doing this. But for your benefit today, we've got closed captions available, which enable you to read the text should you not be able to hear it. Speakers have been invited to share a short dialogue of themselves, which I will invite them to do in a second. We have, for the purpose of this, disabled the chat function, and that's purely so that we can actually just get you to focus on the questions and answers, because your questions are vital to us so that we can make sure that we're addressing all of the things that you want addressed on an ongoing basis. So please feel free to actively use the Q&A panel, which you'll find in the bottom bar of the Zoom. This session is being recorded and links to the video will be sent out. I guess you saw the button as you came in saying that you agree to that, which is fine. Thank you very much indeed. And of course, you'll be able to use this resource not only to refresh yourselves, but also to share with colleagues or to share with peers in your network. Resources and information will be sent out directly afterwards. So Governors for Schools have compiled some information packs, which will be sent out to you afterwards. And in particular, there'll be some stuff around recruitment and about how to engage further, both in Governors for School and in the concept of governing. Finally, there will be a questionnaire at the end, and we would really appreciate if you could complete that questionnaire. Governors for Schools obviously keen to make sure that they're constantly doing the right thing. And the only way that they can learn, as we all learn, is with your feedback. So please feel free to complete that. Good. Okay. Thank you for taking that slide down. I am joined by 3 incredible experts, and you've heard enough about me and you've heard enough from me. So I'm going to go straight to my experts. James, a local man to me, given that I'm one side of Cardiff and you're probably the other side of Cardiff. But I understand you are head of people and things at Celsa.
A perfect description, Paul. Thank you. Yes, people and things. I'm the head of people and organisational development for Celsa Manufacturing in Cardiff. It's a recycling and manufacturing company. Things includes health and safety, the environment, talent acquisition, and skills and development. So obviously it's a nice rounded approach. Chief cook and bottle washer.
And give me some idea of the scale, James, of the Celsa business. I mean, I know its size because I pass it, but others may not.
So we're based in Cardiff. We have 1,000 people directly working for us in Cardiff. We then subcontract a lot of labour, probably another 500. But we have 16 sites then dotted around the UK. So another 1,000 people involved in that chain. So about between 2.5 employees, which fluctuates, and then another 1,000 people involved in the production. So. Okay. Yeah, but most importantly, I'm a governor, I suppose.
And that's why you're here. And your responsibility is national?
It is, yeah. I cover all of the people development and people issues for Celsa in the UK. So, yeah, it's very interesting, learning the different ways in which we do things in the different businesses. It varies. It's not the same in Cardiff as it is over in London, as it's not the same in Scotland as it isn't in Birmingham. So we have to adjust to the way that things work in the different parts of the country.
Super, lovely. Thanks, James. Paula, expert number 2.
Hello there.
By no means less important. KPMG, CSR. Lots of initials here. KPMG and CSR. Let's put some meat around that. Tell us a bit about your role.
Okay, so my name is Paula Roque. I'm from the corporate responsibility team. So my role, I'm an assistant manager in the team, and I work outside education and the environment. So I work on special projects, but I also lead across group volunteering, as well as governance across the business. So my main role really is to put all these amazing people in these governance roles, whether it's school governors, trustees, enterprise advisors.
And just, CSR is one of those buzzwords that's been around a while, isn't it?
Yeah.
What does it mean?
Well, corporate responsibility, it really is all about creating a responsible business. So it's incredibly important for business to be responsible. And that means that we really want organizations to create a structure so they can allow their colleagues to be able to give back to the community and to have that social value. So go ahead.
Okay, so there's a bit of a pattern building here, which is rather nice, isn't it? We've got somebody who's a governor who's involved with people, and we've got somebody who's involved in corporate social responsibility. Will, it's starting to point towards you. Will Durham, you are our representative from Governors for Schools. Tell us a bit.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Will Durham, and I'm the head of key accounts and London operations at the charity governors for schools. So thank you all for joining the session as part of our conference. I've worked for the charity for around sort of coming up to 6 years. I've also been a school governor for around about the same period of time. And a lot of my work is focused on developing the work that we do with many of our wonderful corporate partners, such as Paula and the team over at KPMG, and in helping encourage their staff to become school governors and providing them with the training and resources and ability and opportunity to meet with each other and discuss best practice and sort of further school governance within their own careers and within sort of the corporate responsibility that their organisations involved with.
Perfect, great, thanks, Will. So to set the scene and to follow the theme of the conference, I think it would be incredibly useful, Will, if I can just come back to you and ask you to tell us a bit about Governors for Schools as an entity. What is it trying to do and how is it going to achieve it? And then I want to move on to talk a bit more about governorship. But tell us a bit about Governors for School initially. Yeah,
absolutely. So Governors for Schools as a charity, we've been around since 1999, predominantly working across England, rolling out, being a nationwide charity sort of in the mid 2000s. Our core remit is to ensure that every state-funded school has access to excellent governors. Our vision is for all schools to have excellent governors, and also and all schools to be performing well across England and now Wales. A key part of the work that we do is going out and building relationships with sort of corporate partners, with businesses, with large employers across the country, and encouraging their staff to step forward, to come forward, to become school governors, and as I've said, supporting them to be really effective in their roles. And what's really exciting about this session is that we're coming up to the first anniversary of our presence in Wales. So in November, Lauren joined the team, who was our first ever partnership manager for Wales, and we've taken on responsibility to help fill the sort of 1,300 or so governor vacancies that there are across Wales. So it's really exciting to be in this call with people representing various businesses across Wales. And it's great to have James here talking about specifically about his experience of being a governor within Wales. As I say, there's over 1,300 vacancies across the country, so we do need people. We do need people to step forward. Every governor vacancy is a missed opportunity for someone to give their valuable expertise back to a school. It's that input, it's that bit of perspective that comes into the decision making. So every vacancy really is a missed opportunity. And at government schools, we really recognise that schools are essential stakeholders in their communities. And by you as employers, but supporting your employees, volunteering in governance roles is a really fantastic way in our view, for you to have a meaningful impact on the communities in and around your businesses and where your employees may be based. And we find constantly, whenever we sort of go out, we speak to employees, and we speak to those people who've been placed as school governors and been enrolled for a while, that it really builds their sense of connection with the community in place. It's a really fantastic way. I know for me, being a governor in the local area that I used to live in is a fantastic way for me to develop, and we're keen to develop that further. Don't want to go too much into the governance role in total. We've got James here to share that, but we really don't want to overlook the professional development that the role offers. It's fantastic. There's a fantastic opportunity for individuals to gain access to what can at times be like seemingly endless CPD, to learn how we can take the skills that we've developed in our professional roles and apply them to the benefit of schools in our local community. So it'd be great to touch on that as part of the conversation today. Governance is all about setting strategic visions for schools and helping schools to be accountable and staying away from the day-to-day sort of operational nitty-gritty that schools and we all put up and we all sort of get on with in our day-to-day working lives, and making sure that the school has a clear vision of where it wants to get to.
Okay, Great. So you can see automatically the link back to the CSR piece that Paula was talking about a second ago. If I just stay with you, Will, for a second, before I come to James. Tell us about, what is the average life of a governor from a Governors for Schools perspective? Then I'll probably ask the same question of James, just to see if he's got a different response.
Yep. So we find that lots of, we do follow-up surveys with governors after a year, after 2 years that they've been enrolled, and the vast majority, stay. Once you put someone in contact with the school, sort of well over 90-95% of those stay in the role. In terms of the governor role in general, you're appointed to a 4-year term of office. There's no penalty for someone stepping down within that, but obviously schools are complex institutions. There's a lot to learn about any individual school. It has its own history, it serves its own unique community. So it's really valuable people to be able to stay in their role. And we envisage, and we find that lots and lots of our governors, as they go through and they gain more experience, they take on leadership roles, within their school governing board. So you might come as a member of a governing board and join a committee with a specific remit, but then in time you might go on to become a vice chair or a chair of a committee or the whole governing board in general, and take on more of a leadership role in that role, which is always fantastic for us when we hear volunteers taking that on and being open to taking on leadership roles in the future.
So my assumption is that there's only one type of governor, and you just, that's it. But that's not correct from what you just said.
No, well, there is. So all governors have the same role and responsibility. There's different names that are applied to school governors. You could become an authority governor. You could become a parent governor. You'll also have a staff governor, and the different sort of names and labels are just applied to how you get appointed to that school as a governor. We governors of schools mostly deal with co-opted governors, which are people who are based in the local community and who are appointed based on the skills and perspective that they bring. The rest of the governing board feel that they add value to the school. A parent governor will generally be elected by parent election. Staff governors by staff election, and local authorities will also place their own representatives on the governing board. And obviously head teachers will sit on that as part of the work that they do. However, those different names, the different names that we apply to them, once someone's appointed into a governing role, you have the exact same sort of role and responsibilities. Your job is there to go and give, to support and challenge. It's just a different label, and there's sort of slightly different ways of being appointed to the role.
And I guess those different types of governors, bear with you, James, those different kinds of governors just representing different stakeholder groups.
Absolutely, yeah. So
sorry,
most schools.
No, I was just going to sort of follow up on something that Will had said, which is it is just a route into being a governor, and that's certainly something I've found. You have, when you think of yourself as a local authority governor, or you think of yourself as a parent governor, you almost feel as if you're there to represent the views of those groups, which are not. It is just, for me, it's the way in which you enter. Quite important to me is that when you're on a governing body is that things are very equal and they are shared. You just bring a different perspective, and it's your entry point, the way in which you're voted in, should we say. I think that's important to know.
So as the independent here, because while Will has been a governor, he also works for Governors for Schools, so is giving us a completely and utterly unbiased opinion, as you can see. As the independent here, James, just tell us about life as a governor.
Well, where do I even start? I think, firstly, the thing I would like to say is it's not as arduous as I first thought. Initially, I thought I'd have to have a huge knowledge of pedagogy and how schools worked, and have a massive knowledge bank to be able to assist and support the teachers and the teaching staff and the head teacher. And that simply was something that was just nonsense, absolute nonsense. The amount of time that I commit, which I think is probably the $10 million question. What am I doing? Probably a meeting for an hour, 2 hours a month, if you added it all up. I like to think of being a governor. If someone says, how long have you been a governor? And you say, oh, I've been a governor for 10 years. It's a bit like saying you've been skiing for 10 years. You haven't. You've been skiing for a week 10 times. So, it is a commitment, yes. But the amount of time that you actually spend doing the governor role, it's not anywhere near as much as I initially thought.
And that commitment is part of your working life, or is it separate to your working life? What time of day do these occur? I mean, just to put some fabric on it, really, for people.
I suppose it depends on the school and depends on your employer. So I'm just going to give a completely honest approach and say that this is a bolt-on to my working life. I initially got into being a governor probably because I was flattered by the request, if I'm being totally honest, and the fact that I had children in school. And what I knew about being a governor was very limited. It was only then through that experience or speaking to the outgoing chair that I understood the skills that I had that I could bring to it. But it is definitely a bolt-on. I am not fortunate enough to be in an employment where I can afford the time during the day. However, I do have the flexibility to attend, maybe an interview every so many months that needs to be done in school time. The rest of it, the school is flexible and tends to run meetings 5 o'clock till 6 o'clock, or 5 till 7 if it's an AGM. The way these things can go. But in general terms, yeah, it is a bolt-on. But I see the benefit from it. A, for the school, B, for me, and C, for the business that I work for.
And CELSA, I guess, as we would deem CELSA down here to be a fairly large employer, and one of the larger employers in Wales, given the fabric, the network of businesses that we have down here. CELSA see that as being a contribution back to the community. This is part of their, and I'll come to Paula now in a second to talk a bit more about this, but this is their contribution to corporate social responsibility, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, hugely. One of the things, if you don't know us, we're based right slap bang in the centre of Cardiff. One of our main gates, which is next to the melt shop, the main part of our industrial unit, backs onto Willows High School in Splot. There's no getting away from the fact that this school is our neighbour. And therefore, it's important that we are engaged with them to understand what it is that we do, and obviously give a little back to the school. As Paula said earlier, it's important for the business because we want to be a good neighbour. We want to be part of the community that we live and work in.
Excellent. On that note, Paula, just continue to unpack that CSR piece and the relevance to governors and schools for me, so that we can just start to see the links that James is now talking about. Absolutely.
So, CR is absolutely fundamental to KPMG's strategy, because it aligns to our firm's key values, which is, together for better. So it's also about being a responsible business. We know that CR makes a positive impact on society as it demonstrates the purpose behind our work. And for us, our main focus is tackling disadvantage and supporting social mobility, particularly education, whether it's literacy, numeracy, and lifelong learning. So how that works with us, with school governors, is we have amazing people within our organisation that have incredible leadership skills and core skills. And what we would love for them to do is to sit on boards to share their strategic vision and to really help to strengthen the governance on boards. And again, that's the same with trustees as well. So it's also about using your skills to help disadvantaged, to help social mobility, and to create that strong leadership that's needed on boards.
So is your role, Paula, not just about KPMG's involvement, but also about helping KPMG's clients to become involved?
Absolutely. So we always look to engage, convene and collaborate with other businesses and clients. And that's again to, raise awareness on the key issues that's important to us, but also to raise the profile of the business. It's all about enhancing the brand and to showcase what we could do across the UK in terms of our vision and our purpose.
So I can see that a company like KPMG would have a willingness and a statement which says, that CSR policy is important and school governorship is one avenue that we can pursue to address that.
Yes.
How does that message land with your client companies? Because they may not have the same holistic approach that somebody like KPMG would have.
Well, for me, it's about having that conversation. So getting involved in corporate responsibility, it opens up that conversation with client, showcasing what you're doing, but also it gives them food for thought. So it allows them to widen that conversation. And, when it comes to corporate responsibility, I think it's important to get involved with something that's important to the business. So you can demonstrate examples of what you're doing out in the communities. And then afterwards, it's also a perfect opportunity to do collaborations with clients. And again, if they haven't thought that way, it just gives them food for thought on what they could do further down the line.
And how do you create that awareness? So, there may be people listening saying, well, I can learn something here because, Paula's doing this job. And if I'm an HR like James is, and I've got a certain level of corporate social responsibility, I've read the book, I understand, I'm not an expert. I need to start to convince, my stakeholder community around me. How do I do that? What's your advice in starting that process to engage people's thinking in this as a concept?
So I think what you need to do is look at it from top down. So think about what is important to the business and what makes sense, and also to concentrate on what you're good at. So we know that, you could, when we first started out in corporate responsibility, we were doing a bit of everything, and then we decided let's focus and let's draw upon our strength on what we know we're good at. So we focus on the key areas, which is literacy, lifelong learning, and numeracy. And then it's a case of really embedding the structure into the HR. So go into your people, your HR, and explain to them what you'd love to do. It's also about thinking about what is your purpose. People come into your organization, what do they really want? Are they coming to the organization for monetary value, or are they coming because they want a sense of purpose? And I think it's important to get the balance. So many people, as in new hires into our business, they chose KPMG because of our strong stance on corporate responsibility. And many people want to have that sense of purpose when they're in an organization, and they love the fact that actually we support that, that vision by giving them days to be able to do causes around the community. So I think the first thing, as I mentioned, is to find a cause that you're really passionate about, and that's going to work across the business.
So what you're suggesting is start small, engage, and build on that.
Yeah, I think so. Start small, get lots of engagement around the business. So get your business and your colleagues to understand what your vision is, embed it in your values, and so that it's just a conversational point. So you're always having maybe departmental meetings, or you're bringing it up in team meetings and getting them used to the fact that this is what you want to achieve. And then start small. It might be a charity, it might be a school governor, and then just build upon it. So you can build upon it and make it just make it a wider vision. But I'd say start small, and then afterwards expand if need be.
Okay. James, and Will, I'm going to come to you in a second. Paul has laid out very clearly how it fits into a CR program, and how KPMG have done it. How does that play out in CELSA? Is that how CELSA came about it, or is it, is your governorship the kickoff for CSR in CELSA, or is it the other way around? Maybe you don't want to answer that question.
It'd be very difficult to answer that question, but let's just tackle it in a very honest way. I'm sure there are plenty of other people who are listening. They're in a similar position to me, which is we can't afford the time from the day of our 40+ hour weeks to be able to be having people going off and doing governorship in work time, and that's just being totally frank and honest. And I hope that's a view shared by other people listening. But what I will say is, and I'm sure will touch on this, or me, or any of us, is the amount that actually can be gained by the company through the development of skills, which is what Paula's, I think, touched on in when she was saying that, if you get employees coming to the HR department, well, that's me in our firm, and saying this is what I'd like to do. I'd actually go the other way around and say that if a smaller company, when you are identifying a lack of some leadership and management skills, being a school governor could fill that gap, and actually fill that gap with low or zero budget implications. So I hope that answers the question in as honest a way as I can.
No, it does, and thank you for that. And it's just it opens the door for the subject but one. But let me just come back to Will for a second, because you used a statistic at the start of this, Will, which says we've got 1,300 vacancies in school governorships across Wales. I'd hate to think what the number is nationally, but let's just focus on the 1,300 in Wales. That is an enormous hill to climb, and clearly, a deficiency within the system. How do you plan to address that?
Well, very much by going out and building, it's all about building awareness. There's a sense of, it's true, the idea that you can't be what you can't see. And I think so many people who'd be fantastic school governors haven't heard of it. So haven't heard of the role, or people hold certain preconceptions about, you need to be a parent of children at the school, or you need to be, at a certain age or come from a certain background, which absolutely isn't true around school governance. So the approach that we take, and we are still, Lauren's been doing a fantastic job over the last sort of 10 to 11 months, but, we're still very, very early on in our journey of supporting schools across Wales and going out and building those relationships with, with schools, with local authorities, with representatives from councils, and also with businesses and employers and, and individual communities across the country. So our plan is to go out, and take really good stories like James's story and broadcast that out to people, allow people to see that the school governor role, A, is incredibly important, and B, is something that's that's attainable to your average person. You don't need to have a specific background or specific set of skills to be a school governor. It generally is open to anyone over the age of 18, and we want that diversity. So we aim to go out and sort of build traction through promoting the role, recognizing that the work that a charity like Governance of Schools does will only ever be a part of the solution, but it's just having that joined up approach, that going out and building awareness, highlighting success stories, and piece by piece inspiring more and more people to become school governors, and also importantly, providing them access to training, both via us, via councils, via individual schools, that allow people to feel supported in their roles. Because there's no good, there's not much use appointing someone into a school governance role if they quit after 6 or 7 months because they've really struggled to get the grounds of that. So focusing on the induction, the effective onboarding of new governors is a really important part of helping with that retention crisis.
Okay, I know we've been working with Lauren for most of that 11 months, and she's got a huge mountain to climb. It seems like an awful lot of people. The definition of school governorship, the span of education, you're talking primary through to secondary. What are the parameters around this so that people can get a feel for the, I guess you don't go into further education because at that stage you're into non-executive directors and trustees.
We'll work at college level. For college, there are other services that are available. If people are looking for college governance, but yeah, absolutely, ages primary, nursery, primary, and secondary school, and then also special schools. So either schools for children with sort of moderate or severe learning difficulties, but also simply have governing boards. So there's a wide sort of variety there, of types of schools that people can get involved in should they wish to become a governor.
Okay. James and Paula, a thought. I guess there's a perception out there that actually large companies can afford to do this and small companies can't. We'll come back to the impact on small companies in a second, because there are some unique demographics about the Welsh economy which may mitigate against this. So we just need to be very careful about this. James, you've made it clear that your commitment is your commitment. It's not CELSA's commitment. Clearly, there's a direct link and a relationship and a benefit to all here. There's a triangulation between those. I understand that, particularly as your front gate backs onto the school. How large companies surely can afford the executive time to be able to do this? That's a horrible question, isn't it?
I don't know if it's a question or it's a statement that I would probably just agree with. It's certainly my perception is that large companies, in particular, Paula's lovely, we've spoken a few times, but KPMG can probably afford the time, or that is my perception, that KPMG can afford the time. And as you come down the route, down to very grassroots level, where people have the right skills, but as very small staff numbers, can they afford the time during the working day, or even encourage their staff during the working week to do over and above the 40 hours that they already do? It is certainly a perception that is held, without a shadow of a doubt.
Well, if I could just, what would I say? So we work with sort of really large employers like KPMG. We also work with much smaller employers, down to sort of the 100, 150 level, at some levels, to help promote the role. And we do often find that, absolutely it is easier, sort of economies of scale for, for an organisation such as KPMG to offer staff that time. But the actual amount of time that's required, it's not a question of people being out of work for an hour or two every week. I know in my own governance role, we at governance schools obviously are given time off for volunteering, because it's part of that's what you'd expect, given the nature of the charity. But it's only sort of once an academic term, that I ever sort of need to be out to fulfil my governance duties sort of outside the remit of outside of sort of the meetings at 5 to 7 that you spoke about, James. So it's not as it's not as huge a time commitment, as we might expect, and we do know employers that will that place it and they view it, they just view it as part of CPD, and if there is existing sort of CPD practices, developing sort of management and leadership skills and developing future leaders, and then allowing, it can be a really valuable thing to allow staff that time, the return on investment. I would, again, I'm quite biased here, as Paula pointed out, but the return on investment for that is quite high, and the experiences that people get from being school governors and things you can get involved in. And it needn't be as time consuming as we might fear when we think about the school governance role.
Sure. Paula, I mean, from a larger company perspective, and KPMG is right up there in that large company bracket. How do you address that perception that you've got lots of people you can give us a fleet of governors? Somebody could argue that Will could fill, or Lauren could fill, the 1,300 roles just by drawing on the KPMG staff dotted around the country, but clearly that's not the case. I guess it's about skills, it's about competence, it's about time, it's about as James said earlier, it's the person you want to be the governor is actually so important in their own professional equation that it's very hard for them to release that time. How does somebody like KPMG address that challenge?
Well, I mean, as you mentioned, many people are busy. They're busy on client work. They're incredibly busy. But what we do is we build it in. So we give everybody 6 days a year to volunteer. And we don't expect them to take the 6 days. We, on average, they take about 2 or 3 days, but we give them 6 days as part of our value. We give them 6 days a year. And if you're trusted, you get 2 additional days. And we say to them, getting involved in becoming a governor, it's all about your personal development. What is it? Why do you want to do it? And it's almost like drawing upon that passion, but also it's also a personal development goal. So we try to embed it into our HR processes, but also our career pathways. So if somebody wants to hold management to account, or they want to, understand about strategic direction, they'll join a board to gain those skills and then bring it back to the business. So it's a win-win situation. They're developing their own personal development skills, but are also bringing their learnings back to the business. So it works both ways. So
one of the myths that I had hoped that we might be able to address in this discussion, I think we've just further aggravated, because you're talking about having time available to be able to volunteer.
Yes.
And I know that, Will, you said clearly because of your role within the charity, there's a natural sequence which says you should have time to do that because it helps you to your role, etc. And I suppose you're a clear example of why being a governor in the role that you have is directly beneficial, because you can not just sell governorship, but you actually can act it out as well. But 90-something%, the number varies, but it's somewhere between 98 and 99% of Welsh businesses are SMEs. And the other slightly scary statistic is that something like 90+% of those are micros. So they're in the smaller end of that, which means they've got somewhere, varying definitions across the territory, but they've got somewhere between 0 and 9 employees. We are in an economic state of some disarray at the moment, nationally here in Wales, nationally in the UK, and internationally as a result of the last 18 months that we have endured. And Britain is further aggravated by its challenges created through Brexit and its departure from the European Union. Many businesses that we speak to on a day-to-day basis don't have time to think about anything further down the road other than today's survival. how do we even start to convince businesses or encourage businesses that this is good for them? Let's not talk about the people. Let's just talk about the businesses. If I'm running a business and I've got 8.5 employees, so I'm in that micro space, all of those employees are working incredibly hard. Somebody tell me, what's the benefit for me to allow, enable, encourage any of my mid to senior staff to engage in a governorship role? That question is open to anybody. I'm happy to take 3 responses at once or individually.
I'd like to just say about the ESG. So there's a new standard that's coming out. It's called ESG, which is environmental, social, sustainability and governance. And it's basically a new standard used to evaluate the operations of a business to determine whether they are socially aware. So a lot of the investors, a lot of organizations are being measured on how socially aware they are in terms of what they're giving to society. So I think it's really important to get involved in some sort of like, you know, ESG type of activities for your business. I
understand that. ESG certainly at private equity level and in some of the high street funders, that's becoming a critical issue. So what are you doing in respect of ESG before we think about investing in there? Understand that. Yeah. But again, if I'm operating remotely, countryside, Wales, small number of employees, I'm not in that space, and I'm still while that standard will come and it will apply to everybody in due course. Yes. Today's challenge is today's problem, and for me, I'm still trying to work out how do I, as a company owner, what benefit do I get other than ticking the investor box? And I understand that, Paul, and I absolutely take that point. That box ticked. What more immediate benefits do I get as an employer releasing that person or encouraging that person to be part of this program?
Skills, simply skills, development skills. Any business can't continue to just harvest from the same patch of land. And there is a skills shortage in Wales. We see it. There is an absolute skills shortage. A lot of people coming out of colleges, but not necessarily with the right leadership or management skills to act at the right level, not the right communication, interpersonal, problem solving, decision making, chairing meetings, delegating, all of those skills, they're not taught in school, they're taught in work. If you've not got the right structure, you're a small company, you've not got the right structure, you've maybe not got the right mentoring structure, or you don't want to pay 800 quid, 1,000 quid, 2,000 quid to send someone on a course for 5 days to learn a skill in a very sterile environment, I would say that being a governor gives a far more dynamic way of learning those skills and allows a business to potentially plant the seeds for the future rather than continuing to just harvest from the same crop. It's very difficult trying to run a business, particularly through COVID. It's been horrendous, absolutely horrendous. But you've got to, I'm sure all of the people listening, I think themselves, they've got one eye on today and one eye on the future. They've got to have, all business leaders have got one eye on the future. And for a people person, I would say that's not just about developing your customer base or making sure you've got the right supply, or it's about developing, obviously, your most important asset, people.
People. Okay. Will, any thoughts?
No, I think James has really captured the point perfectly there. It is all about developing those skills, and getting people who are, who develop, who are taking that, the whole role that you do as a company is you act as a sounding board. You help solve you help solve problems at the school. You help act as a sounding board, to school leaders, and then you take those skills back with you, into your day-to-day professional role. I know. There are numerous examples in my own governance role, of times and the things that I've learned, through being a school governor, like things that I've been subjected to, and things I've experienced that are clear, that clearly sort of, help me be better, be more productive in my day-to-day role, not just being able to talk about school governance from a position of having done it myself. And that's it, and if you are a small employer, it's not about having, it's about your local community. I imagine most small employers will probably, will have a responsibility or a basing in their local community. So there's no need to go out and have, You know, it's wonderful to have partners such as KPMG who are having this sort of impact on a national scale. You've got people based all over the place, but just having a couple of your employees who are based in schools allows you to have that direct impact. You know, those employees have that direct impact on schools in the local community. You can develop relationships with those schools. You know, it may be that the governors are then looking for, you know, there might be a careers day at that school at primary or secondary level, and they're looking for a speaker to come in. If you can spare, you know, if you can spare someone to go in and take part, you know, and share their experience, their professional experience for an hour, you have that opportunity that James spoke about of inspiring people to look into sort of joining your industry in the future and help building that sort of future talent pipeline, because we have all the problems we're facing today. We also need, we need to be developing, and we need people to come into our industries, in 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 years time. So it's a great way, it's a great way of building that relationship in your local community.
And that's a great segue into my next question, really, or the point that I wanted to make next, which is, the whole issue, and James, you've probably got a view on this, as do you, Paula, which is the whole issue around recruitment and retention has changed fundamentally over the last 12 to 18 months. And, you read statistics this week that 1 in 3 applicants for a job will turn the job down if they're not allowed to work from home. So it's suddenly becoming a criteria which says working from home is important. And I think, to Paula's point, ESG is also becoming an important aspect to it. And I guess people are becoming more sensitive to the fact that companies need to engage more in the community and support their local communities, which I guess is a consequence of COVID driving people back into their communities.
The one thing I would probably say is that when we talk about, people wanting to work from home, there's definitely a shift in what people want from work. But I'd also like to address the whole thing of the whole work-life balance and give my perspective on it, which is we need an approach which is a bit more like work-life Jenga, where there are so many different elements to life. It's not just a balance between two bits, so work on this side and life on the other, 50-50. It's a whole Jenga puzzle where bits are moved around and the tower is shifted, and therefore, building skills, developing skills, doing a role as a governor can be part of that Jenga. Similarly, what COVID has, I think, taught us is the fact that work can be spread out through the day, the traditional, not necessarily the traditional 9 to 5. And therefore, you have got a bit more flexibility within the day, not the working day, to fit in a bit of CPD, if you want to call it that. Because let's be brutally honest and take away the yes, I totally agree with Will's point and Paula's point about corporate social responsibility being part of the community. SALSA certainly thinks that that's what is hugely important to us. But let's say that you're only looking at it from a selfish point of view. I think that you can develop those leadership skills in the work-life Jenga by getting some of those skills and development from taking part in governing body committee meetings or supporting or coaching with teachers or the head teachers.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely correct. And I think Matthew Long, thank you, Matthew, for that comment, has just come in on with a question there saying, doesn't it improve retention as well as the recruitment opportunity? And that's probably what we're saying, is that employees are going to want to see this type of activity. Challenges though around city centres, surely, because if you've got a city centre firm, and Paula, you may have a view on this. My assumption is you're London-based. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes.
But if you've got a city centre firm and you've got a commute involved, at what end of the train, of the track, is the community engagement? Do KPMG feel, or does a large company based in London or based in Cardiff feel that they should be giving back to that community? Or how do we address the tension of the individual who might give back to his community, which might be 10, 15, 20 miles away?
From a KPMG perspective, we have 22 offices across the UK. So what we do is we have local opportunities and then we have London opportunities. And we work closely with Governor for Schools. And the individual going forward to that position would just basically say which area they would like to have the opportunity, and then afterwards Governor for Schools will match them. So there's opportunities nationwide, depending on which community you want to serve.
Okay.
We find so one of the great things about governance is that obviously, like everything, it's been forced online, through the impact of COVID. And while many schools will be going back to in-person meetings as soon as possible, I've got a governing board meeting later this week, which will be taking place in person. Also, smaller meetings like committee meetings, like most schools that I speak to will be holding those online, so they'll be. Which makes it that much easier, makes it that much easier to put time into school governance, because you might work, particularly, if you're in a large city like Cardiff, Cardiff, you're Swansea, you might live a fair commute from the school that you're a governor at. But it's been fantastic. It's moved governance forward a few years. Everything in school tends to be a little bit behind business and what's going on in the business world, but having that ability to have sort of flexible meetings, and some people potentially exploring sort of hybrid meetings where some people are there in person, some people are dialing in. It democratizes school governance. It allows it a lot more. It allows people who've got small children that might not be able to afford the 3 or 4 hours out of their evening to travel to a school and back to take that role on. And we find the vast majority of governors, people who have come through to us, they do want to become a governor in their local community where they live. Although we do get those that would prefer to be who would prefer to be a governor in their local area. KPMG in London, say, have got a large office at Canary Wharf, which is Tower Hamlets, which is incredibly well served by businesses, even though it's a very socio-economically challenged part of the city in general. But so we often encourage people to consider becoming school governors in their local communities where they commute into their sort of central office work where in normal times.
Okay, so we've taken the journey through what is governance for school, down to what is the role, down to the role of the larger company and the capacity of the larger company, CSR, ESG, and now we're talking about the smaller company. And we've been very clear about the benefit of those smaller companies and James, I think you'd probably wrap it up in 1 or 2 words, which is probably skills and skills, because that's what you opened with. So I'm an owner manager, and I'm making toffees in Swansea, and I employ 7 people. How do I start this program? How does this kick off? How do I convince either myself or any of my employees that this is a route that we should take? Because we've clearly demonstrated what the value is to the business and what the advantages are to the business and what that person in that role will bring back to the business. What does the person get from this engagement? Not the business. What does a person get? What did you get, James, apart from skills?
Well, I give some. Okay, apart from skills, what did I get? Like I said, it did start with that I got a huge amount of ego boosting. All right, I'm not gonna deny it. It was fantastic. Yeah, it was. When I was initially asked to become a governor, I knew very little about it, and then therefore didn't really know what I was going to get back from it, other than, like I said, the boost of ego of being asked to do it. But what did I get back? I suppose. Yes, there's the community bit. Yes, there's this stretching. I think the stretch of my leadership management skills, stretching in a different environment. My current environment, or the environment in work, sometimes can be a little bit comfortable. Very similar people, probably very like-minded, probably share very similar views because you've all been recruited in the same way or through the same process, or you're all accountants. Who knows? But I think when you become part of a governing body, you really have to look at the people are coming in. As we start right from the beginning of this conversation, we started about people coming in from different walks of life, different means of entry, and therefore the way in which you approach the challenge together, the way in which you have to bring a cohesive team together to share tasks, I think it really stretched my ability to do that. It removes the management structure. So in any business, if you're sitting in a meeting, you've obviously got that clear definition of management. Well, he is my manager, she is my manager, they tell me to do X or Y, and therefore I in some regards, I do it in some regards. But of course, that's removed in this situation, and therefore you have to stretch your way of bringing people around to your idea, or even challenging your own thoughts and ways of doing things by listening to others. So I think listening, probably, I've talked too long now, but listening is probably one of the things that I actually developed, believe it or not.
As a good HR person, you would do that anyway. Was it uncomfortable for you?
Initially, I think it's always uncomfortable stepping into the unknown. Of course it is, because like I said, right at the beginning, you asked me what it was like. And I said, oh, I thought I needed all of this background of schools and education. And I have to say, I come from a family of educators, of head teachers, deputy head teachers, and senior lecturers. So I almost felt as if I've got all the skills. No, it's just not about that. So there was this huge amount of stretch, large amount of learning, capacity to learn, take on new ideas and concepts. I would say that particularly for board level, like I said, it just pushes you outside your comfort zone. And I think it also, if you are able to be that critical friend, you know, at a vice chair or chair level within a governing body, which normally takes a bit of time, if you can be that critical friend to a head teacher, because you can be objective to the situation, you can ask the right questions, it really allows to see stretch in the head teacher. And if you're stretching the head teacher's likely to stretch the teachers, and the teachers are likely to stretch the kids. And I think that also helps.
That's an interesting link. So what you're suggesting is that good governors will produce good academic results for those being educated.
Well, good teachers do that. I'm not going to say a good governor does it, but I think there's definitely a link in stretching and questioning.
There's a link in pulling that chain.
If you find a school's, if the inspectorate comes in and finds that a school is underperforming, invariably you'll find that there's poor governance at that school. So almost invariably, so effective governance is really integral. It's all about setting, it's all about allowing the school and helping the school leadership to set that culture where success can be attained by pupils, and how allows sort of teachers to flourish and teach in a way that produces those strong academic results, which is fantastic. And what I just add to James, all the really good points that James brought up about being a school governor, is that being a school governor on a personal level makes me feel good. Volunteering as an individual makes me feel good. It makes me feel connected to the communities that I live in. It broadens the time that I spend. I never feel like I'm wasting the time that I spend as a school governor. When I'm reading through the data, or I'm having a conversation with a head teacher, or other leadership teams, and looking at the curriculum implementation at the school or anything like that, it gives me that sense of well-being that you get from volunteering, without getting into sort of hierarchy of needs and all that. I can say from my personal experience, and for most people that I know that school governors, is that it simply makes me feel good. It can be a challenging role, but it's really, really good for me. And I know that in all my experiences, the working life, that when I feel good, when I feel connected, when I'm happy and content and challenged and motivated, I tend to be a better employee. I tend to be more productive in my day-to-day role when I have that sense of connection and purpose. And being a governor is definitely a contributing part to that.
Excellent. So we've talked there, Paula, about what the individual gets, and James is very clear that he probably didn't need to do all that revision before he turned up at his first governor's meeting, because you learn it on the way. But if you're a small business, what are your 3 suggestions for how does an individual prepare himself for that role?
I think the individual has to ask themselves why they're doing it in the first instance. So is it a tick box exercise, or are they passionate about wanting to give back to the community? Because ultimately they're not going to be in that position if it's just a tick box exercise. They just need to want to do it, but also they just need to be open-minded. They just need to be open in terms of what this opportunity is, and then having that honest conversation with Governor for Better in terms of what's expected of them. So it's that expectation, what's expected, and after the Governor for Better can talk through the process with them. But I just think the most important thing is they have to be true to themselves why they're doing it, and also the commitment side of things. If they feel they can't be committed to the cause, then I just think the individual shouldn't go for it. So they have to be committed, passionate, and wanting to give back to the community, as well as developing their own personal development.
So that's all about the individual's motivation.
Yes.
And James was clear, which says that he got a real buzz from being invited, and Will says it really improves the working day. But I know nothing about how schools work other than children go in, there's an interaction with education, and better educated children come out because of the excellence of the teacher network that we have, and clearly from Will's comment, the excellence of the governance network that we have. But there's a massive amount to learn, isn't there? You have to get your head around, how does a school work, and how does the management structure in the school work, and how do all the stakeholders around interact? Is that something you prepare for, or is that something you just go in and listen and keep your radar open?
My belief, go ahead, Will.
Sorry, Paula. I would say just from when we speak, so obviously we speak to lots of people who are in the process of becoming school governors. It's to focus on that first sort of 6 to 12 months is very much a learning. It's a learning curve. It can be quite a steep learning curve. But to focus on learning about the context of the school, learning about how the board operates, the challenges that are there, and gradually taking on, you can take on sort of additional bits of responsibility. There's lots of quick wins that you can have. You could review, is our website compliant with with sort of regulatory standards? Take a small project that allows you to get into sort of the nitty-gritty of being a school governor, and gradually as you grow in that confidence to expand the responsibilities and be able to increase the conversations you're able to have with the school and the variety of subjects that you can provide that sort of sounding board on. And from our perspective, the learning journey doesn't start once you become the school governor. We have a really useful introduction to school governance e-learning module, which is freely available on our website, which takes about an hour. You can do that, and that gives you a really good overview of the governance role and helps you start preparing for your governance role. And there's lots and lots of support out there. There's lots and lots of induction support, and onboarding support that we made available to you in your role. So you're not just sort of become a governor and left alone. You're helped through that. Most schools will hopefully have things like buddy systems in place. Whether they're a bit more experienced governor that might have a conversation with you, and answer any questions that you might not want to ask it, in worry of sort of looking stupid. So I really say to anyone starting out in this process, you're absolutely not alone. It's a learning process. Don't expect to go in there, and be a seasoned, like we would do starting a new job. You have to learn. You have to learn the new culture. You have to learn how things operate before you can really start to make an impact. Have that sort of 100-day plan that we often speak of. In the professional world that we live in.
Okay, thanks, Will. Paula, you wanted to come in there?
No, I absolutely agree with Will. I was going to say that the training resources on the Governor for Better website is fantastic. The person can go back and they can look at previous webinars, they can look at all the training material according to where they are in their journey. And it's just creating that network where you can actually feel comfortable asking questions within that network.
Look, we've got 2 minutes left. Sorry, James.
Well, all I was going to say, Paul, is that you said what preparation, and I just sort of give it some facts and figures behind it. We recently did a skills, knowledge, and experience audit of the governing body committee. And there were 36 different areas that we questioned or looked at where we had skills and knowledge. And out of that 36, just looking at the report I've got in front of me, only 8 of which were related to actually educating. At the end of the day, education is a delegated authority to the head teacher and their staff. So, 36, 8, it means that there's 24, just checking, other skills out there. Out there, which were,
actually 28. It's okay.
28 skills out there, which are not related purely to education.
So those are broadly business skills, which is the link directly back into business.
Sharing, change management, coaching, health and safety, finance, leadership, human resources, legal, procurement, purchasing, you name it. They're small businesses. A school is like a little small business, its own budget. It runs like a business.
So in the last 30 seconds, the other myth that I wanted to address, and this is completely unfair because I haven't allowed enough time for that, it just shows the quality of chairing. Don't ever put me in a governor's chair. I'm in the middle of a transformation program on a Chamber of Commerce down here to move it away from the perception that is full of grey-haired old men thinking about their lunch. Isn't there a perception out there that school governors are retirees or people with time on their hands, and it's not necessarily for busy executives or busy staff in companies?
Oh, there's 4 people on this panel, Paul, and I can only see one grey-haired old man. So I know, and it ain't me, and it ain't Will, and it ain't Paula. So
that was very fair. The only question I would have is that if you had hair, I wonder what color. Yes, okay. But yes, I think it's a very clear demonstration that we have such a diverse mix here that it's actually a much younger pool. It's actually a much more open pool of recruitment, isn't it?
Absolutely, and that's what I'd say is, promoting it amongst, promoting the role amongst our employers is a way of challenging that and bringing people from different backgrounds. We encourage schools to look outside their own networks to find new governors, and that's the best way of of addressing that sort of perception problem that there can be with school governance.
I'm now going to drive around to CELSA and just ask any of the employees what colour James's hair normally is, so that I don't feel completely victimised by that. So listen, Will, Governors for Schools Conference, we're at the halfway point. We've talked about the engagement of businesses, how businesses can get involved, whether you're a large business, a small business, an individual, whatever it is, how you can get involved. You now move on for the rest of the week through your conference. A couple of closing comments from you for Governors of School?
Yeah, absolutely. I know Lauren is planning on following up with everyone that's attended, everyone that registered for this session, with just information about how you can get involved. So, if you've got any further questions, just book a conversation in with Lauren, with myself, with a member of the GfS team. We'd be absolutely delighted, to come along, to have that conversation and talk to you in more depth about how we can support you, to encourage your employees or yourself even into school governance roles. And do look on our website. There's 20 plus sessions across this week. Today is our day that we've sort of the vast majority of our sessions are all Wales based. So do have a look at what's going on. Go back and watch anything that's mentioned to you. There's so much information out there. Wonderful access, just as a way of learning about the world around us.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much indeed. Closing comments, James or Paula?
No, I mean, I would just I would encourage people to look at their business model, look at the skills that they want to develop. Yes, by all means, look at the sort of the corporate social responsibility elements and look at what you can get out of it. Picking up on what something Paula said is there's plenty that you can get out of being a school governor. It's identifying in advance and going in there with an open mind. So
lovely, thank you. Paula?
I agree. I just want to say, please get involved. Again, it's a fantastic way for your colleagues to feel connected to their community, and ask lots of questions if you're not sure, but go for it. Lovely,
thank you. Okay, we've come to the end of our time. James, Paula, Will, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure working with you this morning. You've brought some completely different insights to this to me, including the fact that clearly I still have grey hair, which is fine. To our attendees, thank you very much indeed. It's been a pleasure. We've addressed most of the questions that are coming in. People are saying fantastic, thanks, and in Welsh as well. So it just shows that we're in the right part of the world. Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to sign off, and I wish you all a good conference for the rest of the week. You've got 2.5 days to go, Governors for Schools. Every success in that, and we look forward to seeing you again shortly. Thank you.
Thank you.